This is Nifty Culture. I'm Pio, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Danny Miranda, successful podcaster, social media influencer, former e-commerce salesperson. What's going on, Danny?
Pio, it's a pleasure to be here as a fan of your show to now being on the show. It's a true honor, and I appreciate what you do. So thanks for having me.
You're too kind, but really happy to have you here too, Danny. Why don't you give people some context and talk about a little bit about who you are and then how you got to NFTs?
Yeah, absolutely. So my who I am is I describe myself as a podcaster, somebody who just loves having conversations like this one, who is pursuing the highest version of himself, whether that's emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually. All of it is what I'm aiming to do every single day. How NFTs got onto my radar was because Gary Vee spoke about them so highly in one respect, but I was switched on to them before he went really hard. But him going really hard and talking about them definitely perked my ears up because I know how forward thinking he has been throughout his career. I know you had someone on who invested heavily in Gary's NFTs, and he said in that podcast episode you did with someone, you said like Gary Vaynerchuk is always ahead, and that's how I think about it. And I'm always paying attention to where his moves are because he's switched on and his brain moves fast and he has a very deep understanding of human culture. So that's a little bit about me and how I got into the NFT space.
Gary Vee's pretty good. He's definitely pretty good. He sniped a zombie punk for like 780 grand, a zombie crypto punk, like 3 months ago. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, I think people didn't give him the credit for that because it's such a high price. And he had at that time, I think he had 50 punks already. And this is, months before Friday's buy, where he buys the 8 punk for 3 point something. Someone
3.2,
else
yeah.
comes 3.2, someone else comes in 20 minutes later. So you see like the trend setting. 20 minutes later, someone comes in, buys the ape for like the other ape with the gold chain for like 5M. And
Yep.
then you have the crypto hedge fund or whatever, Three Arrows come through and sweep the floor. I don't even know how many they bought. They raised the floor up to like 90 grand for a crypto punk, which is mind boggling. So yeah, he's on it. You've had Gary Vee on your podcast.
Yeah. And this was before you could see him talking a little bit about NFTs at that time in December, but this was before he really went hard into it. I had him on the podcast when I tweeted out a blog post that I wrote about him when I was 13 years old, and he followed me from that. He said, "Okay, that's pretty cool," and followed me, and I screenshotted that he followed me, and it led. I think it got like 800 likes and just a whirlwind of attention for people to tell him that he should come on the podcast. And eventually, after enough people started to do it, he said, "Okay, I'll do it." And 2 weeks later, we had a 30-minute conversation. It was like me speaking to a hero of mine for so long. Oh, wow, there I am. You're quick with it. Yeah,
You're kicking it with Gary.
it's crazy. So how that story developed. We've had some stories in throughout the years, and it's like I look at that interview, the first YouTube video I have on my podcast, as like something that I'll look back in 10 years. Hopefully it'd be like, wow, that's incredible that was the first episode that I put on YouTube.
Yeah, I'd say so, man. That's pretty wild that that big of a fish was the first, kind of catch that you had on YouTube. And so, okay, so, you follow Gary. Obviously, Gary's a huge trendsetter. He's big into collectibles. The NFT, he's big into like technology and advancing technology. So the NFT space is just this perfect kind of merger of all of those interests of his. So no question, he was going to get involved. You start taking a look, and what happens? Do you start buying? Are you just studying? What's kind of your motivation? I'd love to know someone that's getting into the space in the past like month, for example, what kind of went through your head to get you there?
Yeah, so looking back, I actually made my first purchase when VFriends dropped because I said, I trust Gary Vaynerchuk. if I could have backed him with money in any respect in the past 10 years, I would have. But this is an opportunity as a consumer to bet on a horse that you really trust.
Yep.
So I bought when it dropped, even though ETH was like $4,000 or 4,500, something crazy. I was like, you know what? I trust this guy. I'm gonna put my money where my mouth and my heart is. And so I got into the space then. I'd heard previously about artists. I'd Beeple obviously was a little bit before that, and it was on my radars. Like, wow, culture is really shifting here. There's some crazy things going on. I didn't really understand it. Why would you pay this amount of money for a JPEG? Is like my first thought, and was my first thought probably 6 months ago. And as I started to realize that, okay, if I buy this, I can actually go to the conferences. So it's a real utility that I can have. That was a huge separator for me. And being like, okay, it is this piece of art online that I own, but it also is something that I can access in the real world. Another thing I'll say is that the reason that I bought the NFT that I did is because Gary Vaynerchuk tweeted to me to follow my intuition and just to reply to me like, hey, follow your intuition. And this was before the drop. And then I bought the intuitive iguana. And so it was a personalized purchase for me. And so that was my first purchase of NFTs. Since then, in the last month or so, I've dabbled with buying other projects and really gotten more interested in the space to play around and to taste things, as Gary Vaynerchuk would say. And so that's my NFT journey.
Okay, so intuitive iguana has a special place in your heart because of that, follow your intuition, and you were already thinking about, joining Gary V in the NFT space by buying one of his projects, essentially investing in him in a way
Mm-hmm.
that you couldn't before because he didn't have any publicly traded stock, or he still doesn't, right? VaynerMedia is a private company, and this was the first time that you could directly invest in someone that you had extremely high conviction in, right? Just like
Yeah.
someone that looks at a company and says, "Hey, there's great fundamentals here. I'm going to buy the stock," or looks at Bitcoin and thinks, "Wow, this really is the future. I'm going to buy this Bitcoin." This was your way of connecting and investing in Gary V. What other projects now have you looked at? What else have you dabbled with?
So I've played around and thought about a couple of things, like what are the projects that are doing this for the long term and who have talked about doing it for the long term, and also what are the projects that really hit me when I look at that piece of art. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. I like that. I could see this being a part of culture. So a couple that I've played around with are Deadheads, who I know you've interviewed the creators of that, and I really enjoyed that interview you did with them.
Yep.
Goats, and I don't know too much about the forging of goats, and maybe you could explain that to me. I purchased before that happened. And then another one is the dogs, the junkyard dogs.
Junkyard dogs. Okay, there's been a lot of dogs.
I
So
know. It's confusing. But I interviewed the junkyard dog creators, and that was I liked how they were speaking about their project. So I said I'm going to go ahead and purchase some of these.
okay, well, yeah, I mean that's interesting because that kind of happened. That's happened to me before too, talking to the founders of some of these projects, because when you sort of hear from the person and you can kind of see what kind of work is going into it from them, it creates a different feeling for you as a buyer. And when they're not fully anon, it's also, in my opinion, a vote of confidence, because there's so much anonymity in the space that it's kind of hard to be able to discern sometimes, like, is this just literally a rug pull? Am I donating ETH to a black hole here, or is this something that's going to come back my way? Really quick, the reason I was laughing on the goats forging thing is because, if any viewers right now that are watching the channel that have been watching it for a while, they know that Danny San Nogueira, who's on our channel pretty often, is really big on goats, and he was really big on the forging mechanic because it was the first of its kind. And basically, the forging mechanic, which I think you're right, it hasn't been like rolled out yet, is taking two goat NFTs, and maybe even actually like a goat NFT and another one. I don't know how that's going to work, but at least two goat NFTs, and you can forge them. And as a result, you have a new NFT, which Danny was extremely excited about. He's talked about it at length on this podcast. it remains to be seen, like the real long term impact of it. But it's without a doubt a new mechanic. So anything new in NFTs, I think, is important to cover. I made a comparison, like a little bit of an analogy to mixed martial arts, where in the NFT space, there's always a new contender kind of popping up out of the blue. It's not really like the NBA where it's the same faces season after season. It's like in mixed martial arts where out of nowhere a brand new fighter joins the party, and all of a sudden that's a top 5 fighter, and maybe they have a new technique, like they have a low calf kick that people hadn't seen before, and then all of a sudden everyone else picks up that technique, and then there's another technique. So the forging is like some new leg kick that someone was throwing in there, and then before you know it, maybe every NFT project will have forging. So that's kind of the kind of way of the world in NFTs right now. And if you've been in the space for a little bit, you can probably tell it moves pretty fast.
Yeah, it is so fast. And it's like what hurts me is I'm not into Discord yet. I can't follow them. I feel like an old man at this point because I'm like the way Discord moves, I'm like, wow, I so much prefer Twitter. That's like the way that I consume information better. But I know the Discords are where the action's happening. And if you really want to be first on the projects and understand the community, and I really haven't spent enough time on the discords to understand like what makes each community unique. And so have you spent a lot of time in discords? Like what is your recommendation for getting the most out of the platform of Discord in general?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. So the NFT space, the primary place where it lives is Discord, without a doubt. That's where the majority of communication happens. It's really easy to like kind of break information in that sort of format where people can just like type out sentences and just jam on the keyboard to break information as soon as possible, copy and paste and just ping it to like 20 people, like, you got to buy this project, right? But I agree with you, it can be incredibly overwhelming. You're a Gary Vee fan. If you go into the Gary Vee Discord, it's like it's just going so fast. What I would say about Discord is to find a Discord channel that you can consider your home base, right? And so here's where I'm going to shamelessly plug the Nifty Culture Discord. So if you join something like the Nifty Culture Discord, there's equivalents, right? There's like the NFT Siblings Discord, right? There's all these other Discords where it's sort of like people's home base. And then there's like usually a general channel. There'll be like maybe like a upcoming drops channel, a channel that's specific to a particular project or something like that. And that can kind of be your home base, and you can, fit into that community a little bit, talk to the people there, and you can get the alpha from there. You can get the information that's valuable. Just being in one, you're definitely not going to get all of the information, but it can be a starting point for you to just get the lay of the land and start to build relationships. And then from there, you can try to work your way up and get into some of these secret discords, right? You have to understand that there's literally like secret discords where people are just moving and shaking and deciding what is a hot project to invest in, and then whales will just like move the market. So when you have this really young, this really, really early market here that we have, that doesn't have that many market actors in it yet, and markets can really be moved by anybody that has even like a medium sized wallet, you get a lot of, like, people call it manipulation. I like to call it like influence, right? Like, I don't, manipulation kind of has like a negative tone to it. It's really market influence, and these whales can influence the market in their favor and cause FOMO, which you'll hear a lot, and then people will ape in based on FOMO. But I'm honestly like you, where I think Discord can be overwhelming. I stick to my home base for the most part, which is not common. People usually go really hard on Discord, but because I'm connected with people like my partners at Nifty Culture that really do heavy lifting on Discord, and because I spend so much time on Twitter and in Twitter Spaces specifically, which is emerging as the voice solution to learn about the markets and to have connections in the markets, that's where I'm able to keep my head above water. But keep in mind, I'm not like a high frequency trader in this space like a lot of people are. I haven't traded my way up to a CryptoPunk or something like I see people tweeting about today. So there is a lot to it, but it depends on what you want to do.
How do you go about covering this space while remaining unbiased and trying to evaluate everything I mean, it seems like an incredibly difficult thing, like almost like a financial journalist, but also you're in it in a sense, but maybe not in it to the. How do you think about all that?
Dude, great question, man. Yeah, and I think I'm glad you asked because like we have a few people watching now, and I'll maybe even clip this out when we're done, right? So, number one, Nifty Culture has never received compensation from like an NFT collectibles project or from an artist to like pump their project. You know what I mean? Like a lot of times people will say like you guys were pumping this, or they'll say like I bought 25 mints of this project, like I spent 2.5 ETH on this thing because you we're talking about it. And it's like, so first of all, I didn't tell you to do that. But we're required in a way to give a platform to these projects, or at least that's what we want to do. Like we want to be a media platform that covers the NFT space, right? So we've never received compensation. The only sort of compensation you could say is like maybe once or twice we received like one NFT to like give away, as like a promotion. And I don't even think those projects sold out. But at this point, I think the direction that we're slowly going in is we're trying to figure out what's like a healthy balance to be able to make it make sense for both sides. And again, it won't be like a you pay us one ETH. It'll just be, like a giveaway thing or something like that. So again, it's a new market, it's new technology. We're trying to figure it out. But like the most important thing to me is to be able to discuss a project without telling people to buy the project, right? And I think you mentioned the Deadheads video. I'm really proud of the way we handled the Deadheads video because there's a lot to talk about. They've already been out for a while. They've got a story to them. And I think that's really important. That makes it more interesting. They were already successful. They've already built a community. They're talking about doing something innovative, actually, aka making a TV show. So with them, it was easy to do a 45-minute stream that wasn't like, buy this project, this thing's going to make you money, but rather just dig into the project and try to, figure out what the kind of story is there, which is what it's all about.
Yeah, it seems like a really hard thing to balance, especially because it's such a new market, which hasn't been tested, hasn't there's no regulations for this because
No,
we're
definitely not.
just getting started on it. So yeah, it's fascinating. I'm so curious to see how it evolves from a media standpoint as well, like how people start to cover this, how the New York Times will start to cover this. If there's an NFT section in the big papers, right? Like, will that be a thing? It's certainly possible.
For sure, man. And when you look at the mainstream media, right, they're still at the point where they're like, what is an NFT? Like literally,
Right.
like 2 months ago, 3 months ago, they had Beeple on. And they just like basically asked him, like, what is this? Like, what's going on? And he's the artist, right? So he's not even like the best person to ask that because I didn't feel like he gave a good response. And that's not me like throwing shade at people. It's not his job to like field that question. It's his job to
Yeah.
like talk about the project and what's going on. So I feel like the mainstream media is like so far behind. It's going to take so long, and then you'll start to see that trickle down to the smaller media outlets. But I feel like media wise, it's people that are in the game right now that are doing the coverage that's actually, accurate.
Yeah, and it's similar to the internet in 1994. I don't know if you saw that clip with Brian Gumble. He's asking like, "What is the internet?" And I'm curious if like someone's gonna look back in 20 years and be like, "What is NFTs?" and like laugh at that question because it's so obvious or so part of society. Another thing that I think is possible is that NFTs as a whole gets rebranded in some way because we're so early. It's like, will it be known as NFTs forever? Or will some other name catch on, similar to how social media was called Web 2.0 before social media got caught on as a phrase? And I wonder if it'll be the same for NFTs.
That's a fascinating point that I haven't put much thought into, man. That's very interesting to think about. All NFT really means is blockchain. And I think that this is like one of the major gaps in understanding for people to wrap their head around like NFT. Because when you buy a concert ticket and that's an NFT, that's not the same thing as buying a Beeple JPEG NFT where you're just buying a piece of art. And I feel like so many people, the big confusion is, can I just right click and save as? isn't it just a JPEG file? You know, the whole thing with that, right? And so when they buy a concert ticket and they then have this concert ticket in their ETH wallet that they just set up for the first time, and they procrastinated setting it up for so long, but they really want to go and see the Justin Bieber show, so they finally did it, and they got that ETH wallet set up, and the Justin Bieber NFT is in there, and they paid $150 for it, and then 6 days later they get an offer at 170, hit yes, and boom, it's just going to go through. Like pretty wild. Sorry, my phone, I don't know if you can still hear me. My phone was just ringing, so it's throwing everything off. But
Mhm.
yeah, okay, cool. You're still
You're
here.
good.
So yeah, I mean, that's like something to think about. Um, that people aren't putting thought into. And so yeah, I'd be very fascinated to see what direction we call these things. If it gets segmented, if fine art NFTs are one thing, collectibles are another thing, event ticketing's another thing, accounting's another thing, receipts, proof of authenticity, all these different verticals that are going to get
Real
impacted
estate.
by the technology. Dude, real estate 100%, man. It's wild.
Yeah, there's so many different use cases for it, and it's just like the world will never be the same when this gets taken up by everyone. It's so similar to social media in the sense of like in 2006, if you ask anyone, "Hey, are you going to have a social media account?" If you ask someone who's 40 plus, and they'll be like, "No, what is that? That's nonsense. That's crazy." And it's going to be this very similar in 10 years. If you ask someone 40 plus, will you own an NFT, or have everyone will have an NFT, and it'll be commonplace is what I believe. And so it'll be interesting to see how that all unfolds. And you're literally going to be the person who's right at the doorstep of watching that happen. So that's pretty cool.
For sure, man. And you said that's what you believe, and I appreciate that humility. That's sort of like, you're being humble. It's like, well, that's my opinion. But like the fact of the matter is the technology is better.
Yeah.
People call NFTs Web 3.0. I've been, and I get that. I totally get it. But that sort of like, I feel like discredits the magnitude of the actual technology, right? And it's no surprise that it started with such an important thing, AKA money, right? It started with Bitcoin. That's the first blockchain. It's the most powerful blockchain in the world. Money's pretty important to people, right? And this blockchain technology is the best technology that's come out since the internet. So rather than calling it like Web 3.0, I view it as like Internet 2.0, like the second generation of like the internet, the thing that came out when I was like 3 years old, 4 years old, or whatever, email and being able to go to websites and all that. Like the difference between being able to do that and not is so massive. And to me, the difference between having this blockchain technology to serve as, again, a certificate of authenticity, to be able to do these international monetary transactions, like literally within seconds, or move, 150 million bucks without any bank employees. Think about it. If you were like an old rich guy, and you had to move $150 million of United States dollars to like a bank in Switzerland or something, or like a bank in Japan, first of all, that's going to take weeks because there's so much going on. People's whole like jobs, their salary jobs, are just going to be to help you get that project across the line. Whereas right now you can do it with Bitcoin in like literally 35 minutes, and you'd pay like a $10 fee to do it. So to me, that's pretty big. That's a little bigger than just having like Twitter on your phone. Although obviously I understand that social media is a big deal too.
Yeah. It just the same way we're moving thoughts from one person to another person. Like the thoughts that are in my mind go to someone in Asia in 2 seconds. That's what happens with Twitter, right? Now, with money, it's like your actual currency can go from someone right here to Asia in 2 seconds. And that's crazy too. So, yeah, how did you get into the whole crypto space and the whole NFT space? I'm sure that's two different journeys, but I'd love to like hear your story about how you got into it if you haven't told it too many times.
Yeah, no, I haven't told it too many times. And it's one journey with two parts, right? So March 2020 happened, and every market kind of crashed. I was in stocks at that point, and like I had some interest in Bitcoin, but I just hadn't done the honest research into Bitcoin. And then March 2020, everything crashed. I'm living in New York City. Everything's shut down. Literally can't do anything. Like, people are reaching out to me like, "Are you okay because of COVID and everything?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just like in my house." It's not like, aliens have taken over New York City. It's just everyone's in their house. It's like you can survive it, right? Obviously not, downplaying the magnitude of it, but it didn't impact me in that way. So I just started watching YouTube videos, and I discovered Anthony Pompliano, Chamath Palihapitiya, and this guy Chicken Genius. Shout out to Chicken Genius, this dope Tesla bull. So I found all these people on YouTube, and that was the Bitcoin rabbit hole. And then I slowly like just started learning about Bitcoin, and I was like, "Oh my god, this is like the biggest thing ever." And I finally like started to really understand it. And then Michael Saylor comes out in like September or whatever, and I was like, "Oh, this is it." So I'm going so hard with this. And then the first exposure ever to NFTs was I heard a Anthony Pompliano podcast with the Koch Foster twins, so the CEOs, the founders or whatever of Nifty Gateway, and they're talking all about the art world. And I had studied the art world before from when I was a music video director. I just studied all things art to try to understand the creative side to the, just the deepest level that I possibly could so it would inform my work. And the Koch Foster twins were talking about all this forgery in the traditional art world, and I've seen so many documentaries about that. There's literally paintings hanging in rich guys' houses right now that they paid like 25 million bucks for, and they're counterfeit, like a
Oh my
hundred
god.
percent. Dude, it's like commonplace. And NFTs literally completely nix that problem. And just one last point, like when you look at the certificate of authenticity part of NFTs, I have one valuable painting in my family. My mom has a Mario Schifano. He was a postmodern Italian painter, very famous. It's a beautiful painting. She bought it in the 80s in Italy, and it's a real Mario Schifano. So I don't know how much it's worth, probably like 50 grand or something like that. If some Netflix documentary comes out on Mario Schifano, it'll probably be worth $1 million, but the certificate of authenticity for that is a Polaroid picture of the painting with his signature, like that he signed, which is cool. And I definitely like that. And it's cool, but it's not the same thing as an entry, like a signature on the blockchain. So when you just look at the technological difference, it becomes pretty clear pretty quick with NFTs. But it took me like from that, when I first heard that interview with the Koch Foster twins until I bought an NFT, it was still months because it was kind of hard for me to take that dive and actually buy the JPEG. And I don't know if you had a similar experience with that, to actually, hit buy and have money leave your account and get a JPEG in return.
Yeah, it took Gary Vaynerchuk backing the project himself for me to actually say, okay, like this is something I'm willing to do because I trust this man. So therefore, buying this JPEG will be putting my trust in him, and that I'm okay with. I'm not okay with just speculating. So
Right.
yeah, that makes sense. What was the first thing you purchased, and why did you purchase it?
So the first thing I purchased was this. I'm going to pull it up, but first I'm going to pull up your intuitive iguana right here. So this is the first NFT that you bought.
It was actually the a different background. I don't know what they're called. I'm not that
Okay.
deep in the game. I
Okay. A
don't
different
know.
background.
Yeah, I know it's a rarer one, but the second most rare. Do you know which one that one is?
The second most rare, dude. So I don't know V Friends like the back of my hand.
Mm. So that's what he tweeted me,
Oh,
actually.
you got like a holographic one, probably, right?
Nah, not a hollow. Hollows are real nice, but I could pull it up.
Okay, well, I'm gonna pull up the first one that I bought. And it's also
Yes.
worth talking about. It's also worth talking about real quick because so this is to give people a little historical context, meaning historical context since February and March 2021, which is a lifetime in NFTs, man. It's crazy. So Nifty Gateway which is the platform I'm on right now, which is, the Koch Foster twins are the founders. This was the sort of hottest platform for fine art in Feb, go up to February and March. Okay.
Back in the day.
Back in the day. And now we're actually seeing and then the bubble burst. Okay, so February, March happens. There's like this bubble. If you look at it on a chart, it's like a peak, and then it bursts so bad. It is like it's such a bad just capitulation in terms of the price action of
I
all the
tweeted it
pieces.
today. Yeah, I tweeted it today. The sales just went downhill.
Dude, so bad. Like I have an NFT I paid $2,200 for. I could probably sell it for like $500 now. It was brutal, right? But we're seeing a little bit of a bounce here. Maybe it's a dead cat bounce, or maybe it's for real, where we're seeing, like, for example, Bitcoin Angel right here, which I own 2 copies of, is trading at $1,700 when the original drop price was $777, so almost a 3x on that.
Mm.
Faces, yeah, Faces is approaching its drop price, which we haven't seen in a while. Le Anime is performing at above drop price. Genesis is up 50% again. These things were all below drop price like 3, 4, 5 weeks ago. And so the theory that my partners and I have kind of come up with, I mean, not that it's some crazy advanced theory, is that people are getting fatigue with they're just getting fatigue with all of the collectibles avatar like animals projects like goats and stuff like that, and the success of, for example, Justin Aversano's Twin Flames photography fine art project on OpenSea. That massive wild success of that is inspiring people to rotate back into fine art a little bit. And it's funny for me to experience it as it happens, because once the rotation starts to happen, now I'm like, well, of course they're going to rotate back to fine art. It's fine art. But it didn't feel like that 4 weeks ago.
Yeah, these things move in cycles, and it's possible that a cycle is peaking today, right? And that we'll look back in the next 3 months and be like, wow, like people were really hyped on these collectibles or these fine art. Like it all move in cycles, but like you said, the technology is here to stay, and it will just take demand for it to increase. I mean, how many people own NFTs today? Like 100,000, maybe.
Maybe.
So if you think about that, there's millions of people on the internet, billions, billions on the internet. And so all those people will be potential NFT owners, but it takes time. These things take time. So yeah, it'll take some time for the demand to catch up, is what I think at
It
least.
ta- 100%, man. It takes time, and yet Gary V's throwing 3M plus at ape CryptoPunks. It's so crazy to think that we're still so early. And if you go on NFT Twitter, you see we're so early every day, and you get tired of it. But dude, it's so true. It's unreal to think about it. And I talk about this all the time, and I do think that there's other things that'll happen first, but I just can't stop thinking about concert tickets. I really
Yeah.
cannot. I can't stop thinking about it, because it's going to be so eye-opening for people. First of all, this is already something that happens, right? You buy a ticket to Ultra, or you buy a ticket to Coachella, or these big festival style concerts that are super in demand, and they release the tickets like a full year before, like 9 months before, and people buy them then, and they even buy them as an investment then too. It's not just like to go, like people will buy as many tickets as they can, and they appreciate leading up to the event. And this technology is just going to make that so seamless. It's going to make it so that you can study the price action at a macro level of a given event. So over like the next 10 years, we're going to know what the most profitable live events are, to be able to buy tickets ahead of time and have them appreciate, literally turn it into an investment. And you'll have friends that are like the sick event ticketing traders, and they're just making a killing buying tickets to a Young Thug concert and then just selling them for a massive profit, because they know that they can do that. And the other thing is the social media flex factor that comes with that. If you Once we have a platform that's like the Instagram of NFTs, which
Coming.
maybe it is, yeah, it's coming. Maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's OpenSea. Once we have that, you're going to see like the guy that's like in Montana, and he went to like, one show this year, and that's what's on his thing, and he's happy about that show, and it's, I don't know, whatever concert it is, and it's hanging out there. Then you have the person in Miami that went to like, 25 concerts because they live in Miami and they have all those on there. Then you have the guy that works in the music industry in LA, and part of his job is going to these shows, and his profile is literally completely filled. And everyone's like, whoa, talk about a social life. That's a high value person, like if you're into that. So it's going to tell people more about who we are with actual concrete proof versus just me taking one picture, on social media at a steakhouse or something, and that's like the one time, maybe I didn't even go there, maybe I crashed the table or something, because you see all these stories about people faking it on social media. That eliminates that and really creates a new dynamic that I think is going to be like pretty wild to see.
So when is that? Is that 2025? Is that 2030? Is that 2022? What's your take?
So here's my take on event ticketing is that it doesn't come, it might not come from the big institutions that are in that space already, because if they feel threatened by it and they're not technology forward, which most of those like dinosaur institutions, like let's put it this way, it's not going to come from Ticketmaster. Impossible. It's, if anything, it might make Ticketmaster go extinct, right? Like any dinosaur style institution is not going to pave the way. And I'm inclined to say it's going to come from like a little guy, like maybe a musician that starts doing it, but it could actually just be like a blockchain startup company that looks to fill that void, and they act as a big disruptor, like some of these companies like Square do in the financial space or something, and that disruptor is what makes everything kind of accelerate. And then the ones like the Live Nations of the world that are newer and are able to actually adapt and stay up to speed a little bit with technology, then they're able to just continue to exist. The Ticketmasters of the world just go extinct, and maybe Spotify, since they're a technology company, they're like kind of one tier below a Facebook and like an Amazon, but they're definitely tiers above like a Live Nation in terms of technology. Maybe a Spotify gets into that space, and that's how that company grows.
So fascinating. It looks like, and it reminds me so much of Netflix and Blockbuster, the way you describe it, just in terms of new technology that's so obvious. And if the old guard doesn't adopt it, they're screwed.
Absolutely, man. Like 100%. And so I want to ask you, you're getting into the space. What would you like to get out of the space? And so you bought your Gary V. That was the first one. I think that happened in like early May or late April. And so you've been kind of, in the space a little bit, not on Discord, but probably following people on Twitter, listening to content like the content we make here. What would you like to get out of this at this point?
I want to be a part of a community or a movement that society is talking about in some respect. What I see with Bored Ape Yacht Club, what I see with what they're doing and how they're doing it, and how they've managed to go from like just this little upstart to like now having, you know, professional athletes, I think, have that as their avatar on Twitter. And like
Des Bryant, man, he's a big name professional athlete. It's crazy.
and so that is so cool to me. And if the one of the projects that I support could do that as well, that would be amazing. And I'd be like, wow, like that is awesome. That's what I came here for. So that I could experience that rush of feeling like, wow, everyone else is coming on something that I discovered when I was getting into NFTs a few months ago. And I understand those things take time, and it might not, and that's why I'm not really in it for the quick flips of like, okay, I made 3 ETH profit. This is more like I want to be a part of a movement, and if I could do that, then I think that would make the whole space. So if you think any projects you see doing that, I'd love to know about them and be a part of them. Anyone in the comments, tweet me at Hey Danny Miranda, but I'm sure I'm just going to get shilled a bunch of. But like I just want to be a part of a movement like that.
You are going to get bombarded by people that are saying this is the project, but that's fine. We get it. You guys are passionate about projects, and I'm going to talk about this piece in a minute just to kind of show people that are newer to the space what kind of happened with price action on these pieces. But I like a lot of the stuff that you said. You said that you want to be a part of a cutting edge space. Well, guess what? I think that this is literally the hottest space in the world and probably will be for some time because it's the newest, best technology that is out there. It's been out there since '09, since when Bitcoin came out. But like when technology of this magnitude comes out, it doesn't come out very often. The last technological revolution that's so robust is actually literally the internet. And then before that, we're talking about the combustion engine, electricity. And I know this sounds like, I'm like, thinking really kind of abstractly or like my head's in the clouds, but like I'm dead serious. If you don't understand blockchain technology and how important it is, you should probably try to do some research on it because it's literally as big of a deal as, again, the internet, electricity, combustion engine, radio, like things
Pio,
like this,
so
right?
so where should someone start? Sorry to cut you off. Someone
No
is
problem.
just like, okay, do some research. What's the first place you recommend them go?
I think the best way to understand blockchain technology, I'm gonna get killed for this. People are gonna kill me for this, but I think you gotta like figure out Bitcoin, man. And like the NFT space is so fixated on ETH, and I get it. It's fine. I'm not trying to make this like an ETH versus Bitcoin conversation, but like Bitcoin's the first blockchain. It's the most powerful blockchain in the world. It's setting the standard for building layers on top of the blockchain. And I know everyone's going to be like, they're not building anything on Bitcoin. They're building a million things on ETH. I get it. ETH has a crazy good developer community. I own ETH. I spend ETH on NFTs all the time. I sell NFTs. That gets converted to ETH. I keep it as ETH. I'm not poo pooing ETH here or any other blockchain based cryptocurrency or network. But with Bitcoin, it's kind of like a lot simpler because it fills the purpose that it was built for, which is to just be the digital gold of this new ecosystem. And again, it's the first blockchain. So all you need to understand about blockchain is that it's decentralized, and everybody throws this word around. But what that really means is rather than like Amazon having AWS, Amazon Web, whatever the hell, Amazon
Web
Web.
services?
Thank you, Amazon Web Services. Rather than having that, so that if Amazon for some reason goes to zero, every business that uses AWS, they don't like have their websites anymore, or whatever. They don't have their web platforms anymore because it was centralized. We have this decentralized network that's run, doesn't have any employees, it has zero employees, and it has this incentive based system where miners, right? This is modeled after gold. The miners exchange their energy for a reward, which is this currency, which is Bitcoin. And what that does is it makes it so that no one entity controls the network and no one can turn it on or off. No one can manipulate it. It can be influenced just like any other network, but it can't be turned off the way we saw the financial markets get turned off during the GameStop saga, for example. So I think once you understand Bitcoin and that blockchain, then go nuts. And it takes a long time, by the way, to understand it. Like at least 100 hours to even start to understand it. Now Michael Saylor is like it takes 1,000 hours, blah blah. But if you put 100 hours in, however you learn, whether you read, you listen to podcasts, you watch video content, however you have to learn, put 100 hours in, and then from there you can look at Ethereum and start digging into Ethereum and try to understand that. Dude, I am not an expert on Ethereum. I'd be lying. Like, but my partners could talk to you about that. But that's a different blockchain. And then once you start to understand blockchain ecosystems, that's when you can really understand that NFT technology is going to disrupt everything because it's simply better. And once we had the automobile, we didn't like still sell horse and buggy for like 20 years. Like horse and buggy's just done because the car's way better. And we're probably going to see that again with Tesla and energy and stuff like that. But the point is like the better thing wins. The cream rises to the top because that's just the best way for us to operate as humans.
Yeah, and what you say, you prefaced it by saying that it was controversial or something like that, or that you're going to get ripped in the comments for it. But the truth is, like, how could you understand something without first going to the derivative of how it was first created? Ethereum wouldn't exist without Bitcoin because Vitalik was a Bitcoin journalist when it all started and it was writing those papers. And I read Cami Russo's book on Ethereum and how that whole thing started, and that was so mind blowing and so crazy. And it's like, um, Yeah, Bitcoin is the first thing. So obviously start learning there is what I would assume as someone who's lesser. I'm in the space. I'm tremendously passionate about understanding that this will change society in some way. But I also want to say, like, I can't wait to learn so much more because this is the way the world is going to work for the next 10, 20, whatever, 100 years. And it's like learning how this works is so important to just being a part of a new society.
Dude, I couldn't have put it better myself. The way you said it is absolutely on point. And you know, back to why this is the hottest space. It's the hottest space because it's the best technology, like I just went in depth on. It just is. And to create a technological revolution like this again would take a long time. Like to make something better than this would take a very long time. Something like this hasn't come about for a very long time, right? I think the internet was technically invented in like the 80s or the 70s, right? So it's like it's going to take some time. And I don't think there will be like something that replaces like Bitcoin and blockchain in 30 or 40 years. I think it's easily 100-year technology, but that's just my opinion. It's definitely a 5-year technology. Let me tell you that. It's definitely a 10-year technology. So the space is hot because of the technology, because art is involved, and art is always at the center of human culture. It's always culturally relevant. Collectibles are involved, and humans love collecting things. In fact, something like Bitcoin, as money, starts as a collectible before it becomes a store of value, which is the stage that it's in now, just like gold did, however long ago. And then beyond that, there's the financial part. Like people want to make money. And look, I can give some inside baseball here. We have the YouTube analytics of our channel, and I don't want it to be this way. We did not design it to be this way, but our viewers are literally 98% male. And I think that's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. And the videos that do best that we do are the videos where we do like technical analysis or financial analysis of what's going on with a specific collectibles project or the NFT market as a whole, so that people can, consume that information and make their decisions on where they should invest their money for a prospective gain, in other words, to speculate. So it can't be denied. Like, even though it's about the art, even though it's about, being part of this movement, I think the main driving force of like NFT right now is the financial component. So when you combine the technology, art, collectibles and things like that, and then the finance part, what could possibly be a hotter space than this in the whole world right now? There's just so much going into this.
Yeah, it's a wild time, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it in some small way and be able to witness what is going on. So, yeah, man.
For sure, man. And I wanted to ask you, for people that don't know, Danny has a podcast, and from all things that I can tell, it's a successful podcast. And the guests that he's had absolutely kick ass. We had Tom Bilyeu on our show last week. Danny already had him on. Come on now, already had him on. And you've had Gary Vee on. You've had these kick ass guests. Can you shed any light on how you're able to connect with these people? Because I'd imagine that some of our viewers are trying to, come up in the NFT space as builders, just like Nifty Culture, just like we're doing here. Can you advise on how someone would connect with people like that?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is to be someone worth talking to. And that comes from having something interesting about you, whether that is a big collectible portfolio of NFTs, how you flipped your way to a punk or something crazy like that, having a story. It doesn't have to be monetarily induced. It could be about just providing content and consistent content. But people of high value want to talk to people who are high value or they believe will be high value one day. And so the way you prove that is by putting in the work and being consistent with that work and trying to do as good of a job as you possibly can in every given moment. So that's what I've tried to do. I didn't know that the podcast would turn into something where I'd be able to meet my heroes, but I started it because I genuinely enjoyed having conversations and talking to people, and it led into something beautiful. And so if what you're doing on a day-to-day basis gives you energy and gives you joy, keep doing it because you'll get to do it at higher and higher levels.
Awesome advice, man. You're getting some love from some of the nifty culture, frequent audience here. Zyphy Art saying great advice. Lucky one, when we were talking about collectibles, I guess he said men collect things, women have conversations. So that's pretty funny. He's a colorful viewer. Thanks, Lucky one. We love you, man. So real quick, one last thing. We'll go for like another 10 minutes here if it's cool with you, Danny.
Hmm.
So I want to show people some market activity here, and we'll kind of clip this out maybe so people can see what's going on with Nifty Gateway recently. So I bought this piece right here, Eternal Flame by Blake Catherine. I bought this at like maybe $1,111, right? And so if you look and you go back to maybe, let's go back to March. Okay, cool. So here we go. It's trading at between 1,100 and 1,200 bucks routinely. And then like clockwork after March, right? They say the bubble burst in March. And let me just make sure I have this set up so you guys can really see it. Here we go. So the bubble bursts in March, and we're seeing sales start to decline. We start to see $808, right? Still hanging around a little bit in April here, still trading at around $1,000, but pretty quickly, along with the rest of the market, like come May, and look at also the gap, right? If you look here, and I know you can't see, I'm going to actually make it a little bit wider so you guys can see. If you look at the gap here, we're trading consistently through April 17th. And then there's a 2-week gap where just nothing sells, which is definitely not a good sign. No liquidity in the market for this piece. And we see a drop off from routinely trading between 1,000 and 1,100 to almost cut in half, like a 45% decline to about 650. And then it just gets really ugly. You're seeing less and less liquidity, lower volume of sales, and you're seeing a drop off where the piece that was trading at 1,100, 1,200 bucks 6-7 weeks before is trading at like 275 bucks. Look at this. Someone sniped it for 50 bucks. Like it got really, really ugly. And this isn't just this piece. This is the market as a whole. And I'm using this piece as an example because I own it and I followed it. But it's ugly, man. But then now you're
Wow.
seeing a little bit of a rebound, right? Like 3 days ago, literally in the past like 5 days, you see a little bit of a rebound where someone bought a low mint, the number 5 mint for 555 bucks. And then what happens? You see a trend that a lot of artists have been doing where the artist of the piece, Blake Catherine, comes through and sweeps the floor. She just says, okay, I'm going to take matters into my own hands and I'm just going to buy these up. You have them listed at 440 bucks. Cool. I'm going to buy these up all the way up. And now if we look at the piece and we look at,
Wow.
yeah. And if we look at the marketplace and we look at the floor, now the piece has a floor of 900 bucks when it was trading for 50 bucks like 7 weeks ago.
Wow. So what's the takeaway here? And how can people apply this to another piece or a collectible or something like that?
Well, the takeaway here is that we have no idea what is going to happen with the Nifty Gateway market specifically, because we saw this, again, massive run up, this intense, like, blow off top almost, where Beeples were selling for 150,000 bucks when they cost 1,000 bucks at mint, like 150 x return. There were some Beeple sales at 200K just on the Nifty Gateway platform. It's completely nuts. Like not at a Sotheby's auction, just someone bought something for 1,000 bucks and then they sold it for 200,000 bucks, and 200K just got like catapulted into their wallet. It's completely nuts. Um, and then we saw this dump of crazy proportions where this piece, the Eternal Flame, the Eternal Flame right here, dropped from 1,100 bucks to 50 bucks, and now we're seeing this rebound. The big question that I have now is there any staying power in this recent market activity that leads to Nifty Gateway rising again as a relevant and just strong platform, not only for initial drops, but really primarily for that secondary market? That's like what everyone's most concerned about, right? Because, for example, Micah Johnson just dropped yesterday. I picked it up for $1,000, chapter 3 in the Aku series. I'm bullish on that series. I'm bullish on Micah. He could have dropped it on any platform and I would have bought it. the question here is like, does the nifty gateway secondary market sustain? And that's what we're going to see in the next 2-3 weeks. If this piece just has the floor drop out again and it starts trading at 400, $300, that's going to be tough. It's just going to depend on what the market decides is the best thing to put its money into. Is it fine art? Is it collectibles? Is it scarce assets? Is it some wacky random other thing where it's like, oh, if there's 800 mints, that's a good amount? The market needs to decide. So if you're watching this and you want to know what to do, I would say you have to study the market. You have to put some capital in because you have to be personally invested or you won't pay close attention. And you should look at all avenues. You should maybe look at fractional things, right? Because you can buy a fractional Bored Ape or a fractional CryptoPunk, and the level of risk on those assets is way less than just one random NFT by an artist. And last but not least, buy stuff that you like so that at least you're happy with it, even if it goes down. I'm holding all these bags of Tom Yu artwork on Nifty Gateway, but I just love Tom Yu's artwork. So I think that it's so fly. And, once our sponsorship deal comes through with Black Dove that we're working on now, I'll have a big Black Dove NFT display behind me, and I'll just be flexing with some fly Tom Yu NFTs behind me. You call that being bankrupt.
You know, what you talking just now reminds me of something Jack Butcher has said, uh, and that is about the gold rush and the comparison to the gold rush. Imagine that you and your friend both headed out west and you both start digging for land, and then all of a sudden he hits gold and his family is set for life and his next generation is set for life, but under your plot of land there's nothing there. And it's like that is what has happened or can happen in this new gold rush, this digital gold rush. And yeah, it just came to mind when you were talking about the different platforms and different pieces. So
You're
yeah.
totally right, man. And like, so for example, I got in early, right? Earlier than some people because I got in February, and there's notable influencers in NFTs that got in literally like the same day as me, right? So it's like people that are considered OGs got in at the same time as me, although obviously that's not the real OGs that got in before, right? And so I got in at that time. I'm a part of this bubble. I don't sell. I hold everything. So now I'm holding bags. So I have real scars come like April and May, right? What drops in April and May? Bored Ape Yacht Club. How much can you buy a Bored Ape for? Zero point zero 0.08 ETH. And then actually the floor dropped to below that. So you could have just come in and scooped up Bored Apes left and right for like 0.06 ETH, which at that time, it wasn't that much money. It was definitely less than $500, right? Those things have a floor of like I checked like last night, it was like 7.5 ETH. It's this
Hmm.
completely outrageous floor, and that's not even for a rare one, right? So someone that came in after me that was wide-eyed and bushy-tailed could have just stepped on that plot of land, as in just popped on OpenSea that day, saw the Bored Apes, liked them, saw that they were trading for below drop price, said that seems pretty cheap, bought 3 or 4 of them, and now if they just held those things, they're sitting on a gold mine. Or, if the first day I got an NFT, someone said, all you got to do is buy a CryptoPunk. The CryptoPunk is the way to go. I think I could have bought a CryptoPunk for like 6 or 7 grand the day I got in NFTs, and I ended up spending more than 20 grand on NFTs within like 3 or 4 weeks. It was like this
Wow.
ridiculous, yeah, it was a ridiculous spending spree. It was a little much, but if I just bought 2 CryptoPunks right there, I would basically have $200,000 in assets right now and climbing. And that's not even, that's just floor punks. That's not even counting if I stumbled on a rare one. So it can be happenstance what information you get exposed to that informs the decisions you make. So exposing yourself to as much information as possible, like being an octopus and having your tentacles all over the place, just touching everything, gathering information as much as you can, and obviously contributing where you can too, is the only way that you're going to be able to kind of land yourself in a decent spot if you're looking to do this as an investment.
It's great advice. And just being open to different sources and trying to figure out what the best sources are is what I'm currently doing. And in that process, I found you guys and have enjoyed following along and appreciate the content that you guys bring out here.
I appreciate it, man. No, thank you very much. And like, for example, this week we're gonna have the guy that created the Vogu project, and so that's like it's a relatively hot project. I mean, it got a little bit of hype for like a whole month going into it, and then it definitely got hype once it dropped. So we have that founder coming on. There's another project, I can't remember the name of it, but we're having those founders on tomorrow, and then at least the founder of another channel, another project. So I think we're gonna have three collectibles projects creators on this week. You shouldn't watch those videos and think because these people are on the Nifty Culture YouTube channel, I'm going to go and buy them because that means they're going to Moon. You should think, what kind of information are they providing, and like what sets them apart from another project, and then do additional research after you watch that video. Get on Discord, figure out what different people are saying about the project, because just them being on our channel does not really mean anything. I mean, we talked about Yetis on this channel for weeks, and the Yetis did not do anything. My partner Malachi, he thinks that the Yetis are better than the Bored Apes, but that's his opinion. Everyone disagrees with him on that. I'm just giving Malachi a hard time, roasting him. Everyone that watches the channel gets that joke. Love you, Malachi. But yeah, that's kind of my little 2 cents on making sure you're able to discern when you're consuming this content what means that you should take action and what means you should stay away.
Hmm. Yeah, something that I'm still figuring out and struggling through, but like I said, this channel makes it easier.
Thanks, brother. Well, any closing thoughts, man, as someone that's getting into NFTs? Any advice for people that are brand new, that are looking to learn more or just get more involved?
Yeah, I would say like start tasting with something small, start tasting with something you can afford to lose and you'll see how fun it is and you'll start to see how these characters start to speak to you and it's crazy and weird and like you feel some sort of connection to them. And so I think that this is just beginning. These are the early days and I'm excited to see where it all leads in 5 years, 10 years because we're just getting started here.
Very well put, Danny. Well, dude, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this. This was a kick-ass conversation. Everyone, make sure that you follow Danny at Hey Danny Miranda on Twitter. I'll put all the links in the description. I know I've been bad about the description, everyone. I've been working like a dog here, but everything will get updated. And dude, his podcast, he's got way bigger guests than we do. So you definitely want to listen to that podcast. And I'm sure as he gets deeper in NFTs, he'll have really strong insights in the NFT space, since clearly he already does. Danny, thanks so much for coming on, bro.
Thank you for having me, and I'm looking forward to seeing everything you guys do.
Sounds good, man. My pleasure. Thanks for watching, everyone. Catch you guys next time.